Imagine discovering evidence that humans were smoking thousands of years before the pyramids were built. Not cigarettes, not cigars, but something far older. For decades, scientists believed smoking was a relatively recent human habit, a behavior tied to organized agriculture and later civilizations. But then, archaeologists found something unexpected buried deep inside ancient pipes. The evidence suggested that humans may have been inhaling smoke long before recorded history, which raises an incredible question. When did ancient humans actually start smoking? And why did they begin in the first place? Because the real answer is stranger than anyone imagined. Most people think smoking began fairly recently in human history, maybe a few thousand years ago. Perhaps with Native American cultures or early agricultural societies. After all, tobacco itself only became globally widespread after European explorers reached the Americas around 500 years ago. Before that, much of the world had never encountered it. So it's easy to assume smoking was simply a cultural invention that appeared late in human civilization. But this assumption leaves behind a fascinating mystery. Because humans have always experimented with plants, ancient people discovered which berries were edible, which roots could heal wounds, which herbs reduced pain, and which substances changed how they experienced reality. If our ancestors were already expert observers of nature, could they have discovered smoking much earlier than we think? To answer that question, scientists had to become detectives, and the clues were hidden in some very unusual places. For years, the oldest direct evidence of tobacco smoking came from Native American pipes dating back around 2,000 years. Interesting, but not exactly shocking. Then, researchers began using advanced chemical analysis techniques. Instead of simply examining artifacts with their eyes, they searched for microscopic traces left behind thousands of years earlier. Tiny chemical fingerprints. And what they discovered changed the timeline completely. In 2021, scientists analyzing ancient smoking pipes found evidence of tobacco use dating back roughly 12,300 years ago. Let that sink in. Over 12,000 years ago. That means people may have been smoking tobacco near the end of the last ice age, at a time when mammoths still roamed parts of the earth, when agriculture had barely begun, when humans were still primarily hunter-gatherers. Suddenly, smoking wasn't a recent invention. It became one of humanity's oldest known rituals. But another question immediately emerged. Why would Ice Age humans start smoking at all? What could possibly motivate people living in such harsh conditions to inhale plant smoke? The answer may reveal something fundamental about being human. To modern people, smoking is often associated with addiction. But ancient humans likely viewed it very differently. Many archaeologists believe early smoking was deeply connected to ritual and spirituality. Across numerous indigenous cultures, tobacco wasn't treated as an ordinary plant. It was sacred, used in ceremonies, offered during prayers, burned during important social events. Some communities believed tobacco smoke helped carry messages to the spirit world. Others saw it as a tool for healing and communication. This suggests something remarkable. The earliest smokers may not have been chasing pleasure. They may have been seeking connection. Connection with their communities, connection with nature, or connection with something beyond everyday human experience. But there was another possibility, one that makes this story even more surprising. Ancient humans weren't limited to tobacco, and they were far more experimental than we once believed. Humans have always been curious. Long before laboratories existed, our ancestors were testing the natural world around them. Some plants provided food, others became medicine, and some altered consciousness entirely. Archaeological evidence suggests ancient societies around the world inhaled smoke from various plants. Some had calming effects, others stimulated alertness. A few produced vivid psychological experiences. This wasn't random behavior. Knowledge about these plants was often passed carefully from one generation to another. In many cultures, only specific individuals, such as healers or spiritual leaders, could use certain substances. This reveals an important truth. Smoking wasn't simply about the plants themselves. It was about knowledge, tradition, identity. Entire systems of belief developed around these practices. But there was still one enormous mystery. If smoking existed more than 12,000 years ago, could it actually be even older? The answer forced scientists to confront a frustrating problem. Some ancient behaviors leave almost no evidence behind. Imagine trying to prove someone drank water 15,000 years ago. It's difficult. The evidence disappears. Smoking creates a similar challenge. Plant material decomposes. Wooden tools rot away. Temporary smoking devices vanish completely. This means archaeologists only discover smoking when extraordinary conditions preserve evidence. A pipe survives. Chemical residues remain. Specialized tests identify ancient compounds. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. In other words, just because we haven't found older proof doesn't necessarily mean older smoking never happened. It's possible humans experimented with inhaling smoke long before 12,300 years ago. We simply haven't uncovered the evidence yet. And that possibility changes everything, because it suggests smoking may not be a cultural invention from one particular society. Instead, it could represent something deeply human. The desire to explore altered states of consciousness, a behavior that appears again and again across different civilizations, separated by oceans, separated by thousands of years, yet somehow arriving at similar practices. But the biggest twist was still waiting. When we hear the word smoking today, we immediately think about health risks, disease, addiction, modern public health campaigns. But ancient people viewed smoking through an entirely different lens. For thousands of years, tobacco was not a commercial product. It wasn't mass-produced. It wasn't aggressively marketed. It wasn't consumed continuously throughout the day. It often existed within specific social, ceremonial, or medicinal contexts. The massive global health crisis associated with smoking emerged much later, after industrialization transformed tobacco into an enormous industry. This distinction matters because it reminds us that technologies and practices are shaped by culture. The same behavior can mean completely different things depending on how societies use it. Ancient smoking wasn't identical to modern smoking. They share similarities, but they belong to very different worlds. And understanding that difference completely changes how we interpret human history. Yet one final question remains. What does this ancient story reveal about us today? The oldest evidence suggests humans were smoking at least 12,300 years ago. But the most important discovery isn't simply the date. It's what that date represents. Ice Age humans weren't merely surviving. They weren't only focused on finding food and avoiding predators. They were creating rituals, sharing knowledge, experimenting with their environment, searching for meaning, exploring consciousness. In other words, they were doing something profoundly human. They were asking questions. What happens if we try this plant? Can it heal? Can it connect us? Can it change how we experience the world? These weren't primitive people stumbling through life. They were intelligent, curious individuals shaping culture in ways that still influence humanity today. The story of smoking isn't just about tobacco, it's about curiosity itself, one of the forces that built civilization. So when did ancient humans actually start smoking? Based on current evidence, at least 12,300 years ago. But the true beginning may stretch even further back into humanity's hidden past. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part. Every archaeological discovery reminds us that ancient humans were far more complex than we often imagine. They loved, they feared, they believed, they experimented, and just like us, they searched for experiences that made life meaningful. The next time you think about history, remember this. There may still be countless stories buried beneath our feet, waiting for someone curious enough to uncover them. Because sometimes the oldest mysteries aren't about how humans survived. They're about understanding what made us human in the first place. And maybe we're still trying to answer that question today.